Welcome back from lunch, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kerel Cooper. I'm the Senior Vice President of Global Marketing at a company called LiveIntent. We're a marketing technology platform that helps brands and publishers with advertising and monetization solutions in email newsletters. I am also the co-founder and co-host of Minority Report podcast, which highlights people of color, women, and LGBTQ community within marketing and advertising.
Hi, I'm Myra, LalDin. I'm the CEO and founder of Vectre. We do virtual reality development for enterprise, and now more specifically, we're working on diversity and inclusion training in VR.
All right, so our session today is about 21st century technology and in the 21st century technology and how it's changing the workplace, and by introducing a new perspective. And Myra, obviously that's what you and your company are focused on, right? But before we get to those details, as we've started to get to know each other, your background is very fascinating and interesting. And so can you talk a little bit about your background and how that's helped shape your college and career goals?
Sure. So I grew up in Pakistan to a Christian family, and if you guys know anything about Pakistan, it's predominantly Muslim and quite religiously conservative. So from a young age, having that understanding that and feeling that you're not really Pakistani because you're not Muslim, that in itself is fascinating, but another element to that is that my parents started a hospital way in the north of Pakistan 35 years ago, and there was no schools there. So we were sent to this American boarding school, and we were the only Pakistani family there. So it was like all Western. It was like this little American bubble. And again, you know, that's at 6.5 years old. And being that young and being put into like this Western bubble was this cognitive dissonance of, you know, what is my culture and what is my identity, because I totally related to all my Western friends. And I think that really propelled, you know, that was my whole upbringing in this international school was, made me really interested in culture in general, and I ended up going into cross-cultural business management. So understanding how people of different cultures work together, and again, that interplay of power and hierarchy. So that was the management side, and then for grad school, I ended up doing cognitive science, so like neuroscience and psychology, again, understanding how people relate to one another, really.
And obviously your background and your upbringing is one of the reasons why you are so passionate about diversity and inclusion. But can you talk a little bit more about that in terms of your passion, why you're so passionate about it?
Sure. So in America, we call it diversity and inclusion, but you know, I see it from this global lens of helping people to really question their assumptions and the biases that they bring to any organization or any environment. So we talked about this yesterday on the podcast. I used the analogy of like a fish does not know water, and that's basically what I'm trying to do, is help us to see the water that we're living in daily. So in America, that comes into diversity and inclusion. How are we treating people? What are the assumptions that we're making about people in our organization, and how does that impact the culture?
And your company, Vectre Perspectives, right? You guys utilize virtual reality for diversity and inclusion training. What led you to explore VR?
Yeah, so after grad school, I went into organizational behavior and did work in strategic inclusion, and I just got really jaded. I wasn't seeing any behavioral change, I wasn't seeing any organizational change, and I think a lot of people can probably relate to that. So I actually left the space, and then I learned about VR about 5 years ago, and you know, really dug into the research of empathy, you know, from great stuff coming out of Stanford, Harvard, University of Barcelona, and I realized that this is the greatest empathy tool that we have at our disposal that allows you to stand in someone else's shoes, even for a few minutes. So I was like, okay, this is where I'm going next.
And as someone who has sat through corporate D&I trainings and has listened to feedback from others, and it not really being impactful and quite honestly being somewhat boring, what advantages does VR have, or what is the impact of VR that you've seen in terms of some of the trainings that you guys have done?
Yeah, so to your point, you know, all the research really shows that this unconscious bias training is actually sometimes counterproductive, and it definitely feels punitive, right? So the difference with VR is we allow it to be this constructivist experience where you're going in and no one's telling you that you're biased or this is what it is. You get to experience it for yourself. So we have, we don't really give a whole lot of context. We just, this is a training, people go through it, and we allow them to, for example, the gender, the female one, where you're a female in the workplace, we let you experience what it's like to have those microaggressions against you, being ignored, being talked over, constantly, men kind of taking your ideas and saying them louder. We let you experience that. So that really allows for people, we get a lot of emotional reactions. We have like men going in there and like trying to punch the male coworkers, or like trying to wave, like, hey, pay attention to me, So it allows for this visceral experience, this emotional realism, versus just sitting in a classroom and someone telling you, hey, this is what bias is, this is unconscious bias, be aware of it. And it's like, great, but now what do you do about it?
Interesting. And what types of organizations are you working with today?
So, I hope that this tool is going to be for everyone, but because virtual reality is still so new, it's a very innovative way of doing D&I. We are working mostly with the Fortune hundreds right now, but and some nonprofits, just because of the cost and the companies that are more innovative. But I hope that eventually everyone's using it.
So I've watched the video on your website, and it's really cool because you really do get to put yourself in the shoes of someone else. And I know we're going to show a video shortly, but can you talk about, as you've gone through the training, what type of feedback or reactions have you heard from your clients that have gone through the training?
Yeah, it's mind-blowing. So we just did a training with GE Aviation, and I could not have written better responses for the leaders coming out of it. It was crazy. So things like, we do the training and then we come out and we lead a debrief. So it'll be things like, I say, hey, so how did that experience make you feel? And we kind of go around the room. I want everyone to talk about an emotion that they felt, because again, it's like a visceral experience. Everyone wants to talk about it. So we go around and the men are like, I felt dismissed, I felt demoralized, I felt angry, and then it comes to the women and they're like, business as usual. Like, it felt normal. Someone last week said, I felt reassured that other people are also feeling this, which was like, gave me goosebumps. I was like, that's awesome. But just to be able to see that difference of women saying, hey, I'm facing this every day, and men being so angry, and now actually getting to experience that, it's really impactful in that. So that's one reaction. Other things are, again, I'm not telling you that you have this bias. You've gone through this experience of, your male boss not looking at you or giving you attention. And I had one man on the C-suite basically say, oh, I do these things. And that was really cool. So for example, we go through something that you'll see in the video, but it's the boss comes in and he doesn't even make eye contact with the female character, which you're playing. Oh, sorry, which you're playing. So we get really tactical. We don't just leave it at, a lot of companies are talking about unconscious bias. We talk about conscious inclusion. What are you doing to be consciously inclusive? So as a leader, especially in this situation, who are you looking at when you walk into a room? Who are you giving power to? Because eye contact, it gives a lot of power, right? So who are you creating space for? Are you stepping back so people feel included in the room? Another thing that's been awesome to see in terms of reactions is how this has actually become an empowerment tool for women, which I did not create this with that in mind, but we had one woman go through that, and she came out of it, and we do exit interviews, and she said, I didn't realize that I face this on a daily basis, that this is something that's happening every day. I just take it as normal. Again, that fish in water, right? You don't realize that, hey, I shouldn't be treated this way. And she said, because I've been able to make choices, because in this experience for this character, I'm going to make these choices for myself. And my whole team was watching, listening to her, and we all got goosebumps listening. We're like, wow, like we didn't even realize that this was such an empowering tool for people. So that's great. And then another reaction, which is like my favorite one, is we had one man go through it who was, he's in D&I, he's super empathetic, and he came out of it and he took his headset off and he was like teary-eyed. And I was like, whoa, what happened? And he's like, my girlfriend has started a new job, and for the last 3 weeks, she's been telling me of all this bias and these microaggressions that she's facing every day. And he's like, I love her, I'm empathetic, and I feel so badly. But he's like, right now, I just had to face every single thing that she just told me. And he's like, and that hit me really deep. He's like, this brought this new level of understanding to me. And later he told me like he went and talked to her about it. But it was just like, wow, even for people who are such advocates, this is this next level of experience and emotion that we can bring to.
Oh, wow. Shall we play the video?
Yeah, so we're gonna play a video just to give you a little idea of what it's like. And of course, this is the video in VR. It's fully immersive, and you're actually in that experience. Wait, let me just ask, how many people have done VR here? Can you see it? Okay, awesome. Okay, so you know. So we'll just show you the video, but this is just one of the experiences. Again, it's about being a female in the workplace.
So, when will this be fully completed?
Maybe
Oh, in the next hour or so.
I'll need a little more time than that.
What do you think, Ethan? There will definitely be some late nights, actually. Might be difficult with your kids, Sue. I think this will be best for you to take on.
Don't you have kids too?
Yes, twin girls.
This is the quality of work that gets attention.
Yes, Sue has been killing it lately. I'm glad I get to work with her.
Thanks, Ethan.
So, thank you. It's a little hard to see and understand it, and I would love for all of you to try it. But basically, you're going through this experience, and it's all interactive. So again, very different than typical diversity and inclusion training. You're actually engaged and creating something in VR. So in this scenario, you're a female and you build out the project, but then your male coworker kind of takes credit for it. Your boss comes in and he looks at the male thinking that he's done all the work, gives him the presentation to do in front of the board. So it's hard to see in the video, but it just gives you a little idea of the kind of scenarios that we can do. And we create all of this from research, looking at stuff from McKinsey, Deloitte, and then we do our own primary research. We work with Harvard. And like we said, like with Harvard Business Review as well, business publishing, we are partnered with them. So again, it's not just like a one and done training. We do reinforcement of the material, so in partnership with them. Is there anything else that you wanted me to talk about from the video?
It's your video, you tell me.
I think, so one of the things I wanted to point out, which you can't really see in the video there, is that we talk about the micro behaviors. So in this, the boss comes in and he's just paying attention to the males. So this is what, we try to make this training really tactical. So we start with, our framework is about empathy first. So, no longer just talking about, hey, be aware of unconscious bias. It's like, what does this feel like? Let's start there. Let's talk about what it actually feels like to be constantly excluded. From there, then we say, okay, now you know what it feels like. Are you able to recognize what those behaviors are that actually create exclusion in the workplace? And then after you can recognize it, now do you know how to respond as an ally? So we have one scenario that's about feeling the bias. The next one's like being an ally and really getting tactical in terms of what did you do what was done differently this time that made you feel so different? Because the training, we allow you to go through the bias, and then we do a debrief, then you go through the allyship, and everyone comes out feeling so much better, and we're like, why do you feel better? What were the actual actions that made you feel better? Because the end result is actually the same as the female character. You're not presenting in front of the board, but you still feel better. And it's just about having someone as that ally, someone to have your back, and to be seen in the room.
And I think that emotion and putting yourself in the shoes of someone else and feeling potentially what another individual would feel, I think is super important, and I think goes a long way to helping people take action as well.
Right, yeah, so at the end of our trainings, we do things where we say, okay, what were your main takeaways and what what are the action items that you're going to do differently now? So in our last training, it was for board members, and they said things, examples like, hey, I realize that women are always given the role of taking notes in meetings, right? And so I said, okay, so what do you want to do differently about that? And he said, well, I'm not confrontational, so I might just say, hey, I'll take the notes this time. And I was like, that's great, actually, because, okay, you're not confrontational and that's not how you want to talk about it, but now you're modeling for other people. You're kind of breaking that mold that it always has to be the youngest female taking notes. And now you're modeling it and you're breaking that mold for that. And for next time, it might even trigger for people to notice that, again, that water, the bias, the assumptions of why do we always assume that a female will take the notes? So I love those kind of like action items that people come out with from that.
Well, Myra, I think the work that you and your team are doing is fantastic. In terms of action items or next steps, if the audience wants to understand more, what can they do next?
Yeah, so we have, you can go to our website, like VR Perspectives, and on there'll be an article, an interview in Forbes that just recently came out. So, this is a very quick conversation. We're not really getting in depth, but that has a lot of great questions in it, and you get to understand a little deeper how this actually works. I know it's like pretty new tech, and we're using it in a very unusual way. So that's a great way to learn more about it. And feel free to reach out to me. I love talking about this topic. If anyone's interested in creating scenarios with us, we create scripts. We do the whole, we do motion capture. If you want to be an actor, come hang out. Like we would love. This is a community project. This is for all of us. So any way that you guys want to, not guys, everyone. If there's any way that you want to be involved or support our work, we're just a small team. We just launched this product like 5 months ago. So any way that you want to get involved, we'd love to have you.
Okay. Well, awesome, Myra. Thank you for the conversation. Give it up one time for me.
Thank you. You good?
Yep. After you.